Okay, hey guys, what's up? It's a Culture Detective here investigating your favorite albums, and today I'm going to continue with my album reviews. Once again, like what I did a few days ago, I'm going to talk about 4 albums in the same video, and I'm going to be talking about it really fast so that I don't bore you guys to tears. So the first album that I'm going to be talking about is the latest Nick Cave and Warren Ellis album, Carnage. This album has been in the talks for a while because it just came out and it got into the top 5 in the Rate Your Music, so everybody checked it out and it is pretty good. Now Nick Cave, I haven't heard all of Nick Cave's work, but for his past few albums with the bad seeds, namely Skeleton Tree and Ghosteen, I've heard them and they're both pretty great, especially for Skeleton Tree. Maybe Ghosteen was a bit of a step down. It was certainly moody, spacey, gorgeous, but it wasn't as instrumentally diverse or as emotionally impactful as Skeleton Tree. Now Nick Cave is collaborating with Warren Ellis for Carnage. And other than the very awesome simplistic album cover, I think the music is pretty usual. It's nothing all that surprising or unexpected. It's pretty much Nick Cave in his usual formula, but with a lot of well-written songs. First of all, we have more versatile musical styles on this album than in the previous Ghosteen, and there's also more dynamic range, which is really nice. The first half of the album is more versatile, and the second half of the album, the last 4 tracks, they are more slow-ish, more emotional, more ballads. The album opener, Hand of God, is also really memorable. We got the pulsating beats, the very cinematic strings, the very crazy refrains in the chorus. The second track, Old Time, has this really strange sort of jazz-flavored, slow, spacey, buzzing kind of instrumental with droning strings. And we also have lyrics about focusing too much on the past, like me. And the title track is overly melodramatic, which is pretty funny, but in a good way. The title track, I just talked about it. Goddamn, I need to sleep. We have White Elephant, which is my least favorite track on the entire album. I just think instrumentally it just drags on. And then we have Albuquerque, which is my favorite song on the entire thing. It is a very beautiful, gorgeous ballad. We have lyrics saying, we won't get to Amsterdam, we won't get to anywhere, we won't get to that lake in Africa. And it's both sad but also somewhat hopeful at the same time. Lavender Fields is certainly one of the duds in the track list, but the last 2 tracks, Shattered Ground and Balcony Man, are both 2 solid and really well-written ballads. And once again, Nick Cave on this album with his iconic deep voice, totally killing it. I think it's a good album, and there's not much to talk about other than that. I am giving Nick Cave and Warren Ellis Carnage an 8 out of 10, and my favorite track here is Albuquerque, and my least favorite is White Elephant. The second album that I'm going to be talking about is the latest Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats album, Unlocked 1.5. This isn't actually a studio album, but more so a remix album where they invited a bunch of people, or they accepted a bunch of people who want to do remixes on songs off of their Unlocked album released last year. So it's called Unlocked 1.5. Not necessarily Unlocked 2, just 1.5. And once again, it's 8 tracks long, and once again, the first half and the second half is a little different. This time, the first half of the album are pretty great, and the second half just trails off. So we have So Incredible remixed by Robert Glasper featuring Smino's feature pretty interesting, but what really makes this track good is the moody and spacey take on this track, which is unexpected and kind of refreshing. The second track, track 07, is remixed by Georgia and Muldrow, and it's more spacey and galactic. And this track is sort of like part R&B, part like noisy instrumental, almost to an industrial degree. And it's a little choppy, but I still think it's not a bad song at all. Then we have Cosmic.M4A, the Alchemist version, the one and only Alchemist, and featuring the one and only Joey Badass, and damn, this track is amazing. I kept listening to this track in the last few days. I love this track. I love the beat of this track. You know, the Alchemist's production is one of a kind. He added these really weird, warpy, gargly, sort of alien sci-fi kind of instrumental, but then at some point when it starts to feel fed up, it would transition into these very bright pianos, which is really awesome. And of course, Joey Badass, great rapper, great flows, the snappy drums are amazing as well. Then we have the track Take It Back version 2, Charlie Heat version, where we get these very punchy horns sort of blasting off, and we also got these strings, and then it would transition into these like early 90s kind of like Pink Panther type beat jazz instrumental, which is really interesting. Then we have the second half of the album, which isn't as impressive as the first half. Let's just admit it. We have Pyro Sango Leak. It's a leak now, and it's kind of a bland beat. The beat is kind of summery, it's kind of sweet, and it just feels kind of typical for a rap song nowadays. And the next track is Lay Up, remixed by Versace, and once again the instrumentals are kind of bland, you know, they're moody and they feel typical. The next track, Diet 1.5, features Benny the Butcher, and while he goes off on this track, it's really fiery and flamey. The instrumental is exactly the same as the previous Diet, as the original one. And while it's good, I like this song, it just doesn't stand out as much as others simply because the instrumentals are literally exactly the same. And the album ends off kind of confusingly with Take It Back version 2, God Mode 950 version, where it's a he, right? Where the person turns the track into a hardcore breaks track with like warped vocals and stuff. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, it sounds like a really good idea, but it wasn't really made into fruition or anything. So yeah, feeling a strong 6 on this thing. Favorite track here is Cosmic, the Alchemist version, and my least favorite is Pyro. The third album I'm going to be talking about is Something Special. Something I've noticed in RateYourMusic.com. I checked it out and it's quite interesting. And this is Otay Onii's Ming Ming, which basically, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, the word Ming means like I don't even know. It's kind of an imagery where it's like it's kind of foggy, and the sky is kind of dark and cloudy, but in a way like it's about to be like dawn. I'm not even sure myself. Leave me alone. But anyways, this musical artist is from Guangzhou, Guangdong, which is basically the most boring city in China I've ever been to, and now she's making music and she's based off of New York. And this album is sort of a combination between dark ambient, art pop, and industrial music, which is really interesting. So I checked it out, and sure, it does sound pretty interesting. Now, I don't think it's a perfect album. I don't think it's a great album either. There are tracks on this thing that feel really derivative of Björk. Like, you just can't help but think of Björk when you listen to some of these tracks. But then we have tracks like Child Number 22, which is this very haunting, sinister, and cinematic lullaby, which is just it just sucks you in because it's so friggin' cinematic. And the track Subhuman Sings, I like the singing on this track. The singing on this album might turn some people off because it's a little weird, a little eccentric, but in a way it kind of reminds me of Joanna Newsom, and it's special. You know, it doesn't just fade away. Anyway, Subhuman Sings, I like the instrumentals. They're very powerful, but I guess I just wish this track is a little longer. Another highlight on the album for me is Blackheart Breakables, which is another really epic and cinematic song. And we also have Intentions and Emotions, where she sort of displays more dynamic range, sings with crazier chops, and we also got an industrial beat sort of at the back, building up to a climax. One concern I have for this album are the industrial side of things. Sometimes it sounds like they're just tacked onto the tracks without any build-up, which would be a little weird, but it kind of works out on this track. And the album ends off with Undeciphered, which sounds really conclusive, and it almost has a bit of a dreamy, nocturnal vibe to it, which is really cool. So there is room for improvement, sure, but I think overall it's a pretty interesting sounding album. Feeling 7 out of 10 on this thing. Favorite track here is Child Number 22. Least favorite, I don't know. Maybe the album opener. The last album I'm going to be talking about is the latest Architects album, For Those Who Wish to Exist. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this album because I don't think there is much to talk about, and whatever is said is already said elsewhere. But essentially, Architects is an alternative metal band from the United Kingdom, and this is their latest album. And it's tacky. It sounds tacky. The songwriting is very generic and bland, in my opinion. The production is very clean and polished in a way. I don't mind clean and polished metal if it really tries to go for that sound, trying to go for that gimmick and make it something special. But in this album's case, it just sounds very bland. I also think the guitar riffs on this album are very gent. They're just very typical for an alt metal band. And I guess that's just it. There really just isn't much to talk about on this album. I think the track Dead Butterflies, while it's still very tacky, the chords are slightly more memorable than other tracks on the album. On the track Little Wonder, they try this like 80s thing with the synths, like the 80s synths, and it just sounds really weird. But overall, there is that. Now, I need to end the video off because I can't help but stare at myself and think to myself, God damn, this guy is ugly as hell. And also, I only slept for about 3.5 hours this morning, so I should really not sleep for the rest of the day. So, I'm giving Architects, For Those Who Wish to Exist, a strong 3 to a light 4, somewhere in between. Probably a 3.9. That would be a good score for this album. So yes, have you heard these 4 albums for 1 to 10? Would you rate and like and subscribe if you want more? And thanks for watching. I am going to have lunch.